Congratulations, you made it to Module 3. Now, in the beginning of Module 2, I said 90% of the people don't even make it to Module 2. But now let me tell you, you're in the top 1%, and I'm serious. Because 90% of the 90% don't continue with courses or things that they commit to. So I want to congratulate you, and I hope you can congratulate yourself. This is not just a little win, but a big win that you made it to Module 3. You're in the top 1%. And also, I know at this point that you're going to finish the entire rest of the course because you made it this far, and we didn't come this far just to come this far. Now, here's the deal. This is where the rubber meets the road, because in this module, I'm going to teach you what to invest in and how we make money. So first of all, I want to talk about what to invest in. Now, obviously, this is an apartment investing course, and so yeah, we invest in apartment buildings. But what type of apartment buildings do we invest in? And then later, I'm going to also talk about where to invest in. That's going to be in Module 4, so you want to be back for that. But some of these things may seem obvious, but they're really not. So number one, we invest in existing, unfurnished, residential apartment buildings, okay? Existing, unfurnished residential apartment buildings. And the standard lease should be a 12-month lease. Now, sometimes we do 6-month leases, and sometimes some of the residents are on a month-to-month, but the ideal lease in an apartment building that we're going to buy is going to be a 12-month lease. Now, I said existing unfurnished apartment buildings because there are people that build apartment buildings and develop apartment buildings, and that's an entirely different business. It's a longer process. I'm not saying it's good or it's bad, but it's just a different business, and I'm not here to teach you that. Okay, I'm here to teach you what it is that I've been doing successfully for 20 years, and that I've helped hundreds of other people do successfully so that you could have the same result. So number one is we want to buy the same type of assets that I've been buying and that my students are buying. So that's an existing unfurnished apartment building. Now, I have seen apartments that are furnished and do short-term rentals and stuff like that, but that is not the ideal business model. It's certainly something I've never done, and it's something that I'm not going to teach you to do or recommend that you do either. Okay, number two is we buy buildings that are market rate. And what that means is we're not doing Section 8, we're not doing government housing, we're not doing student housing, we're not doing anything but market rate housing, apartment unit housing. Market rate means we have the ability to charge what the market will bear, and we don't have any restrictions based on the type of building that we're buying. So that's the second thing we're buying. The third thing we're buying or investing in, and I'm going to use those terms interchangeably, is we like to do 60 units and up. Now, I know this may sound like a huge deal. I know you might even say, Brad, but even you started with 32 units. And don't you think I should start small and somehow graduate up to bigger deals? And my answer is absolutely not. And the reason is when I started in this business, I followed in the footsteps and the advice of my mentor. And at the time, my mentor told me to take as much money as I personally had. See, I used my own money in the beginning to buy that 32 unit. Take all your money, Brad, and buy as many doors as you can under one roof. And for me, that was 32 units. Now, I'm here to tell you that you don't need to do that. And there's a lot of reasons why you don't want to do that. And I'm going to talk about very shortly here today why bigger deals are better than smaller deals. Okay, so just keep in mind we're looking for 60 units and up. And trust me when I tell you that I know you can do it. And the reason I know you can do it is because I've personally mentored hundreds of other people that many of them started with no previous real estate investing experience, and they didn't have the time or the money to do all of these things themselves, okay? So what this means is you're not alone and you're in the right place, and you can do 60 units and up, if you follow through the rest of the course and do it the way that I explain it to you. So hopefully you got that and gives you some confidence. And then the last thing is we're generally buying deals that are B and C class. Now, in apartment buildings, there's 4 property classes. Class A are the newest and nicest properties with all the latest and greatest amenities. Class A properties are generally 10 years or less in terms of the age. Class Bs are the properties that maybe used to be the Class As, or they start to move a little bit, say, in a lower demographic. The Class As are also catering to people that make the most amount of money. So Class As you're going to find in like the urban core areas, the walkable districts, maybe some of the top suburbs in any city USA that are the most expensive places to live. Okay, the Class Bs are generally properties that are built, say, in the late 1980s or mid to late 1980s and early 90s properties, but they also have an income level that may be at least, say, $55,000 to $60,000 a year or higher, maybe all the way up to $75,000 or $80,000 a year in terms of the income level of the people living at that property. And then the Class Cs are typically the properties that are built in the 60s and 70s, maybe the early 80s, and generally have average household incomes being in that, say, $40,000 to $50,000 a year range. And so again, property class is not just the age of the property. It's the age of the property married into the income level of the tenant or the resident living at the property. Okay, so again, the bread and butter of what I've done for 20 years and what most of my students have done are the B and C properties, and there's reasons for that. Now, more recently, we have also been buying Class A properties, and there's a reason for that. But I just want you to know that, generally speaking, the opportunity, especially when you're getting started, and I'm assuming that because you're watching this and this is an introductory course on apartment investing, that you're getting started. Again, maybe you don't have any previous experience, or maybe you're doing some smaller multi-family units like 2, 3, 4 units or single family homes. So again, when you want to follow this recipe, go after 60 units and up and go after that B or C class property, market rate housing that is a unfurnished multifamily property. So before I go into these 4 reasons, just keep in mind that the mindset shift here is you're not doing these deals yourself, okay? The old way of doing things, or maybe the way that you think you need to do things, and again, think about ESBI, employee, self-employed business owner or investor, that I referred to earlier in the course. See, people that are employees that want to be S's, they think if I got to do it right, I got to do it myself. Okay, whereas business owners and investors are thinking about teams. Who do I need on my team, or who else could I partner with so that I could go out and run this business or buy this apartment building? So just think about that. You don't need to have all the time, all the experience, or all the money to buy a large deal. So with that assumption, and I know this to be true, by the way, is that the bigger deals are easier than the smaller deals. So number one, they're easier to get financing, okay? When we're doing 60 units or up, the best financing available is a conventional loan. Now, I know some of you ask me, well, Brad, what about creative financing? Well, let me just say this. Creative financing is for people that need to be creative. No money down is for people with no money. Now, you can buy a deal with none of your own money, but you're going to need to put a down payment on a 60 unit and up property. And my rule of thumb is going to be 30% down. Okay? So let's just take a property that's, say, $10 million. You're going to need a $3 million down payment and a $7 million loan. Now, as opposed to a $1 million property, you would need a $300,000 down payment and a $700,000 loan. But here's the thing. The banks would rather loan you $7 million on that $10 million asset than $700,000 on a $1 million asset. I know it's counterintuitive, okay, but it's true. The smaller loans generally are going to be recourse, which means you have personal liability. The larger loans are generally going to be non-recourse, which means no personal liability. Okay, the smaller loans, you're probably going to get less than 70%. The larger loans, you're probably going to get 70% or more. The larger loans, you're probably going to get 70% or more. So generally, you get better leverage, better terms, and less liability with the larger deals than the smaller deals. Again, larger deals are 60 units and up. So hopefully that makes sense. Also, when you go larger, they loan based on how the property is performing. Anything, in fact, over 5 units and up, they loan based on the income generated by the property. And on less than 5 units, they're going to loan based on your personal income and your personal credit. Okay? So if you do nothing else, you got to start with more than 5 units. But I would just add a 0. And I know I said 60 units and up, but I'm just giving you a frame of reference. 50 units is better than 5. 60 units is better than 6. Now, the other reason that large deals are better than small deals is they're easier to manage. Nobody wants to manage a 5-unit property, a 10-unit property, a 15-unit property, a 20-unit property. And when I say nobody, is that if you want to be a true business owner, that means the business runs without you being there. Okay, when I bought my 32-unit property, I did hire a property manager, and she lived on the property, and she wasn't a skilled and trained property manager. You don't need, by the way, a full-time manager on a 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 32-unit property. You need somebody that's going to be able to collect the rent, take maintenance requests, and generally keep their eyes and ears out on the property, okay? So 32 units, you don't need somebody sitting there from 8 to 5. So hiring a full-time property manager is not, it doesn't make sense in terms of the amount of money you would have to pay somebody and the amount of time and energy that it would take to run 32 units. So you got to find like a resident that can help you out. You got to find a part-time manager, and that's not a great economy of scale. So let me just tell you, on my 32 units, I had a part-time manager and a part-time maintenance person, and I had to oversee them like a hawk. And so here I am, my first 3 years before I was able to quit my job, and I'm basically going to work every day for somebody else, and then I'm managing my manager and maintenance person. Okay? So I didn't have any economies of scale. When I went from 32 units to 62, I realized that 62 units was easier for me to manage. The transition from 32 to 62 units allowed me to have a full-time property manager covering both properties, and it allowed me to have a full-time maintenance person. So it was easier for me to manage 62 units than 32. Hopefully that makes sense, because now I have a full-time, trained, skilled, competent employee on my team. Now with 62 units, I'm still doing the books, I'm still paying the bills, and I'm serving as the role of the property management company, having a full-time property manager and a full-time maintenance person. My third deal, which I'll now reveal to you, I never talked about my third deal yet. My third deal was a 250-unit property. I bought that 250 units mostly with other people's money, not my own. I hired a property management company, which put on a property manager, a leasing agent, a lead maintenance person, an assistant lead maintenance person, a make-ready person, and a housekeeper. So they provided me a staff of 6 people that they trained, that they managed, that they have the insurance for in terms of liability and fair housing and all that stuff. So they take that responsibility away from me and take on that responsibility. Plus they do all the rent rolls, all the bookkeeping, all the financial statements, the cash flow statements. Every single month, I would get detailed hundreds and hundreds of pages of financial reports. So if you're going to mom and pop the property, meaning you or your spouse are going to be the property managers, or having the property managers report directly to you, The banks don't like that as much. Okay, so this business is all about leveraging other people's time, other people's money, other people's experience. And large deals make it easy to do that. Now, the third reason why large deals are better is you help more people. Robert Kiyosaki once said, if you have one single family home, you're greedy compared to somebody that has a 100-unit apartment complex, because the 100-unit apartment complex, you're providing clean, safe housing for 100 families, whereas for one single family home, you're providing clean, safe housing for one family. So just think about that. So you're helping more people by owning more units. And investors are going to want to invest in your deals, and so you're helping your investors make a good cash flow, good upside potential, and good tax advantages. And at the end of the day, number 4, by helping more people, you have more income, you have more wealth, and you can make a bigger impact. Because I know you're not just here for yourself. And if you are, like in the beginning I was, my only why was to get myself out of the rat race and get that $10,000 a month. But once you hit that first goal, what usually happens is now we want to impact other people's lives. So the first person you want to help is yourself, and then maybe your loved ones, and then strangers in the rest of the world, okay? So 4 reasons why large deals are better than smaller deals. So let me show you an actual example of a 154-unit deal and how these numbers worked, okay? So I know a lot of you are thinking, oh my God, Brad, like 60 units sounds like a lot. Now you're going to talk about 150. But I'm here to tell you that hundreds and hundreds of my students, many who started just like you, maybe not all the time, all the money, no experience, are able to come in and do this if they're willing to work with teams of other people. So we bought this 154-unit deal. This is the deal that I personally bought. And within 16 months, we were able to raise the rental income by 21%. The net operating income of the property went from, and this was an annual number, went from $708,000 to $952,000. So the annual net operating income went from $708,000 when I bought the property to $952,000 within 16 months. That was through us raising the rent and doing rehab to the property. That's an increase in cash flow of $244,000 a year, okay, an increase. Now, the cap rate of the property due to what was happening in the market actually went down. So when the cap rate goes down, it's actually good when you own properties because it drives the price up. Remember, NOI divided by cap rate equals value. And so if you just look at that algebraic equation, did I say that right? Algebraic equation, the numerator is the NOI. And so when the NOI goes up, the value goes up. The denominator is below the line, so when the denominator goes down, the value goes up. So in this case, the NOI went up from 708 to 952, and the cap rate went down from 5 to 4. So when I bought the property, it was valued at just over $14 million, and after 16 months, it was valued at $23.8 million. That's an increase in value of $9.7 million. Now, we put down $4.9 million. Now, I'd say, well, who's we? Well, in this case, it could be me and my investors. Okay, now there may be some individuals out there that have $4.9 million to put down themselves, but that's probably not us. And so you're able to raise, and so in this case, I was able to raise $4.9 million, mostly from other people. I put in a little of that myself. And so our initial equity was $4.9 million, but that went up by $9.7 million additional dollars. That's a 198% increase in equity, almost 200%. And I mentioned the increase in the cash flow. So next I want to show you how you could save tons of money in taxes. So this is an example where me and my wife personally saved over $1.2 million in tax. And so let me just walk you through the steps. So step one is we bought a 150-unit apartment building for $13 million. Now, if you remember earlier in the course, I talked about depreciation. And so depreciation is when the government lets you, due to wear and tear on the property, the government lets you write off a percentage of the value of the property each year until it gets down to zero. Now, when you depreciate the property, you can only depreciate the actual physical property itself and not the land. And so if we paid $13 million for the property, including the piece of land that it sits on, that building cost was only $11.44 million. Now, how do we know that? We know the ratio between the building and the land from looking up the tax records. So in this case, that $13 million purchase included 150 units plus the land it was sitting on. So its depreciable basis is $11.44 million. So I hope you got that part so far. And if you're good, we'll keep going. So one of the ways to do depreciation is you do it the same amount every single year, and that's called straight line depreciation. Now, our government, for a residential building, which an apartment building is, it's a commercial building, but it's a residential building. Okay, so it's commercial in terms of lending and appraisals and all that type of stuff, but because people live there, it's considered residential for depreciation. The government lets you take that building value down to zero in 27.5 years for residential property. So we start with the purchase price, we back out the land value, we have our building basis, and then every single year you can take 3.6%, which is 3.6% times 27 and a half years will get you down to fully depreciating the asset, okay? So for $11.44 million divided by 27.5, every year we would be able to write off $416,000. Now, the cool thing about apartments is we don't do straight line depreciation. We do something called cost segregation. And this is getting into some advanced tax strategies, but I know you could handle it because you hung in there and you're in the top 1% of all the people that started this course, okay? So what cost segregation does is it takes that property and divides it into 5-year property, 15-year property, and 27.5-year property. And so what that does is it accelerates your depreciation even faster, okay? And then we were able to take bonus depreciation, which is something that was passed in 2017, and it's good through the end of 2022. And then after 2022, it starts to phase out little by little, okay? And so at the time we bought this property for $13 million, we were able to depreciate it and take a $4.123 million depreciation in the year of acquisition. And again, how did we do it? We did the cost segregation study, and all the 5 and 15-year property we're able to accelerate in the year of acquisition. Now in this deal, me and Jennifer own 81% of it. So we were able to personally take 81% of that $4.123 million, which was a $3.339 million loss. And because we were in a 37% tax bracket, now this was back in 2000 tax year, okay, so things are a little bit different now, but back then that was the amount of depreciation we got, that was the tax bracket we were in, and so we were able to get $1.235 million in tax savings from this deal. We also had 3 investors, and each investor invested $300,000, and they each got a $261,000 tax deduction. Now this is an example of how we could save big money in taxes. It's probably not the best example of a syndication, which is what I'm going to teach you on the next few slides, and we're going to talk about syndicating. A syndication is where you put in a little bit of money and your investors put in a lot of money. This example here was when me and my wife Jen put in a lot of money and we had investors put in a little bit of money. There was a reason we did that at this time. But I wanted to just show you the example about how cost segregation works and about how tax saving works in apartment buildings. And to prove it, this is an actual image of my Schedule K1. So what is a Schedule K1? Every investor in a syndication is going to get a Schedule K1. You're gonna, the GP team, and I'm gonna talk about what a GP team is, but there's going to be an individual or a team of individuals that are responsible for the operations and management of the asset. They're gonna hire a CPA firm, do the company tax return for the asset or for the entity that owns the asset, and then every investor is gonna get their Schedule K1, which has their pro rata share of income, expenses, and depreciation. So you can see, personally, that was my tax return for this property. So now I know this is what you've been waiting for, but this is how we make money. And it's also going into how we invest. Now, I've been investing in apartments for over 20 years, and I've only invested 3 ways. Number one is I bought my own deals with my own money, and that's called individual or direct ownership. I wouldn't recommend that you start that way anymore, because a more effective way is for you to be involved in a group purchase, also known as a syndication. Now, in a syndication, you need to have passive investors or limited partners, and then you need to have a deal sponsor or general partners. And I'm going to talk about the pros and cons of being a passive investor and being a deal sponsor or a general partner. For purposes of this class, I'm going to use the term GP and LP. So we got that? Good, let's move on. So here's the ways we make money with an apartment complex. One of the ways we make money is we make money on the money we personally invest. And so that's called a return on investment. Okay, so you put money into a deal and you get a return. It's also called mailbox money or passive income. Okay, and so apartment complexes, depending on when you buy them and what's going on with the market, if it's in an up market or a down market, we should expect a cash return annually of somewhere between 5 and 10%. And so that's one of the ways we make money, is there's a cash return. Number two is at some point we're going to sell the deal. And within my experience, and at some point we're going to sell the deal. I've never held a property longer than 7 years, and I've never held it shorter than 2 years. Every deal I analyze on my property analyzer, I assume that I'm going to sell it at the end of year 5. And so besides the cash flow, when you sell the deal, let's say in year 5, not only should you get your original capital back, but you should also get an appreciation on that capital, a sales proceeds that's above and beyond what you put in. Okay, so that's the second way we make money. And then the third way is the depreciation, which I already explained to you. So this is how we make money on the money we invest. Talking about LPs and GPs. LPs, or limited partners, or passive investors, the only way they can get into a deal is to make money. So that is how limited partners make money. The GPs could also invest money, and on their money, they make the same return as the limited partners. But GPs typically make between 5 to 20 times more than the limited partners. And let me explain to you why. See, the GPs are the people that do all the work. The GPs find the deals, they analyze the deals, they make the offers, they negotiate the terms, they sign the contract, they raise the equity, they secure the debt, they close the deal, they do the due diligence, they manage the asset, they manage the timelines. Once the asset is closed, they manage not only the asset and the rehab, but all the investors, the investor relations, if there's an investor portal, sending out distributions, handling insurance claims. So the GP team is doing all of the work. Now again, the GP could be an individual, it could be a husband and wife couple, or it could be a group of people. Okay? But the GPs, because they're doing all the work, doesn't it make sense that they get paid more than the passive investors or the LPs? I think it does. I hope you would agree. And so typical ways that the GPs get paid is they could get paid acquisition fees because all the time and energy to find the deals and make the offers and get the deal closed and all the equity raised and the debt secured takes a lot of time and energy to make that happen. They typically can get an asset management fee for the ongoing management of the asset, the rehab, the investor relations, et cetera, et cetera. And most importantly, they could get a split of the deal. And one of the ways they can get a split of the deal is called carried interest. And so what that would mean would be, and this is a common way that I like to do it, is for every dollar that comes out of the deal, if I'm the GP, I'm going to say, hey, look, because I did all the work, I'm going to take 20 cents for every single dollar that comes out of the deal. And all of the LPs, y'all get 80 cents of every dollar that comes out of the deal. So not only am I getting paid when the deal closes and getting paid to manage the asset, I'm getting paid from every single penny or every single dollar that comes out of the deal, say at a 20% cut. That's called carried interest, okay? And so those are some of the ways that the GPs make money, and depending on how many GPs are in the GP team, GPs can make between 5 to 20 times of what the LPs make. So what I've done here is I have shown you an example about the difference in the ways we get paid and the amounts you could get paid between a GP and an LP. So this is an example deal of $10 million where there's an 80% split to the LPs and a 20%, where there's an 80-20 split between the LPs and the GPs. And the other assumption is that the GP is investing $50K and the LP is investing $50K. So we could see all the different ways that the LPs and GPs get paid. So let's just go down the list. Well, the acquisition fee, the passive investor doesn't get the acquisition fee. The GPs are getting that. The cash return, both the LP and the GP are getting a return on their $50K investment. Okay, the GP split of 20 cents out of every dollar that gets allocated to the GP, that only goes to the GP and not the LP. The asset management fee goes to the GP and not the LP. The 5-year gain based on the capital investment, that you can see that's the same, whether you're a GP or an LP. But now the carried interest, the 20% profit on the gain of the sale that's allocated to the GP, you can see that's a big number, okay? So at the end of the day, over 5 years in this example, you can see that the passive investor's $50K would have been worth $90,000. And that's a 1.9x, by the way, which they invest 50 and over 5 years it becomes worth 90. But the GP invests the same 50,000 and makes over $900,000 over the same 5-year period. And that's because they're doing the work and taking on the risk, okay? So what we've done here is I've compared the differences between how GPs get paid and how LPs get paid in a example property. So the next module, and I'm really excited about the next one, is we're going to talk about where to invest, what makes a good market, and what type of pivots and changes we need to be making when the market's going up or the market's going down or interest rates are going up or down or inflation's going up and down. So that's what we're going to talk about. Module 4, where to invest, and key pivots that you need to be making. I'll see you in the next module.